I'm Jenna Wilmers.
And I'm Fran Malfer.
And we are your Ember Igniters. We are so honored that you joined us today. Today we're going to finish up the last 5 R's from the 7 R's to rebuild your fire. Last time we covered the first 2.
That's right.
The first one being reboot your mind. When you decide to rebuild your fire, you have to go through a rebooting of your mind and learning how to change the way you think about things. The other thing that we covered was recognizing your choices have weight.
That's a big one.
It totally is. Because recognizing that all the choices that we've made up until this point have been the culmination of our life.
They're not something we can blame other people for. We choose to do that often. But the truth of the matter is we made choices to allow things to happen to us. So that was a big one.
It was a big one. So let's get started. So the third R to rebuild your fire is to reject negative self-talk. It affects us more than we think.
Yes,
and
it does.
It really comes from a place of doubt and fear and lack of confidence. And like a fire, it kind of consumes everything in its path. And it really affects us a lot more than what we think.
I think it's so subconscious to us. It's so easy to say, well, I'm not good at that. Or she's so much better than me. Those are actually negative things that your brain takes in and says, well, I guess you're not that good at it then.
We do, and then we start to believe it. And it starts consuming your self-esteem and really hindering you from carrying out your God-given life assignment.
Yeah, because you're telling yourself untruth. It's one of the greatest tools of the enemy. He will come at you and he will say lies. And that's what we do with negative self-talk.
That's right. Negative self-talk also stirs up emotions and feelings such as guilt and shame, and really putting us in a place of feeling unworthy or unworthy of forgiveness or even redemption. And, you know, when we think about that, we want you to remember we call the penny story.
Yeah.
And
you know,
you'll be walking down the street and you'll see a penny, and it might have been there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's bronzed, maybe even a little iodized and whatnot. But then also think about a brand new penny that's shiny and beautiful and kind of crisp.
And don't they stand out if you get a brand new coin in your wallet and it's a brand new penny and you go to look at it? It stands out from everything else because the rest are dirty and dark.
Yes. But they both still have the same value. It doesn't matter if it's the old and bronze one or the new one. They both have the same value.
That's right.
And you are the same. You are valuable to God, whether you have baggage and you've been through a crazy life so far.
That's right.
Or whether you've had a good life and you're just living life. You have the same value to God no matter what.
And the nice part about it is that if you were to take that dirty penny, just kind of bouncing off of what you said, and really clean it up, get the right polishes, it would look exactly like a brand new penny. So you have that opportunity in your life to make those kind of changes by not having negative self-talk.
That's true. The other thing with negative self-talk is that you are fueling fear and anxiety in your internal fire. And again, like we said earlier, it spreads like a wildfire. It starts in your belly and then it goes into your mind. And it really just leaves you in a constant state of worry. And who wants to be in that kind of state? I don't want to worry about things all the time or everything that I'm doing.
Not only that, but worry, as many tests have shown, has a direct physical effect on your body.
It sure does.
It causes, stomach aches or ulcers or other things. So it's not even healthy for you.
Right. So how do we overcome it? How do we overcome negative self-talk?
It's a great question, isn't it?
Well, the answer is by speaking positive affirmations. I would hazard to guess that if you actually became aware of the things that you're telling yourself, you would probably find that there's a lot of critical judgment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negativity. There's there's a lot of self-doubt in there as well. And
We
these
kind of went through that, didn't we? I mean, when we thought about doing this, we're like, really? This is what you want us to do? This is our new God life assignment? Right? And sure, you're going to have the enemy come at you and say, no, you're not good at it. Well, the truth is we never did it.
Right.
We never tried it. So it does.
Yeah. And these statements can look like I can't, or I never,
Mm-hmm.
or I won't,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to challenge yourself. We want to challenge you.
That's right.
To challenge yourself to write these things down. Make yourself aware of what you're really saying.
It's really important. If you put it on paper, two things are happening, right? Your body is engaged, it's writing, and the mind is engaged. So you're going to remember, oh, that was a negative thought.
Yes. So once you have a list compiled, we want you to ask yourself, are these things that I'm telling myself true?
Mm-hmm.
Because we can tell you that we were thinking a lot of negative things about
did.
ourselves and not even realizing it because there were sometimes half-truths in there.
That's right. That's a good point, Jenna. There's a difference between whole truth and half truth, right? So that's a tricky little area of your life. So you can say, well, the truth is I am not good at that. But the opposite side of that would be, but I could learn.
Absolutely, just like us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what we want you to do is we want you to replace those thoughts with positive thoughts, just kind of like what Fran mentioned, where yes, you might not be able to do a podcast because you don't know how. But if you're like us, you do the research, you reach out to the contacts that you have, you learn how to do it, and then here you are.
Here we are. Here we are. And it's very, very exciting to be able to know that you have that capability within you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that fuels that fire is by taking these positive affirmations by saying, I can have a podcast. I can host a podcast. And repeating that daily to yourself.
But it's not just the I cans, right?
Correct.
You can actually, and I'm going to get a little bit into this in the next one, you can actually say, I am a podcaster.
That's right.
Right? I am. See yourself there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is our fourth R, actually, and it's called Reimagine Your Future. Well, I think we instinctively do some of that, whether we realize it or not. So I'm going to tell you that when I was about, I really don't even remember how old I was, but I'm going to say somewhere between 7, even as far as up to maybe 11 or 12, I used to dream about being a teacher. And so when I was really young, what I would do is in our garage, I would find a box or whatever, and I would make it the desk.
Oh, yeah.
And I would take this desk and I would put paper and pen, and I used chalk back then, and a chalk, and maybe even an apple to indicate that I was the teacher, because you always were supposed to give the teacher the apple.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd call my sisters and all the kids from the neighborhood and say, come on, let's play school. Now, who at that age wants to play school? But they would come. I don't know why, but they came. And the fun thing is that I could see myself. I even went so far as to dress the part. Now, you can imagine this. In the day, teachers only ever wore dresses. I'm really showing my age now, but they wore dresses. So I would put on a dress, I would get out of my play clothes, put on a dress, and I would stand in front of the class, and we would just have a ball, and we would do fun things. Well, that's what I imagined I was going to be. But life kind of took over, and so I imagine many of you have that same problem where you think to yourself, yeah, I had a dream once, but it just never happened. What do I do now? I mean, life is life, isn't it? It just kind of takes over. Well, I'm here to tell you, and Jenna's here to tell you, that it's really never too late to be great. So one of the other things that I love is Eleanor Roosevelt had a particular quote, and I love this quote. She says, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. That's a pretty key word in that statement when she made it. Sometimes we say things and there's an emphasis that needs to be made, and she really made it well when she says the future. what you see for yourself, it can belong to you. It can belong to you if you believe in the dreams that you have. And so I'm going to tell you another story because it resonates with me, specifically because of where I am in my life and the season that I'm in. I'm going to tell you about a gentleman named Harlan Sanders. And Harlan came from a very tight-knit little family. He was one of 3 children. He was the oldest. But by the time he was 6 years old, his father passed away, which necessitated his mom having to take a job. And that left Harlan taking care of and feeding his 2 smaller siblings. And so one of the things he had to learn how to do was to cook. And as he learned how to do that, he started playing around with different things. He wasn't a cook, but he did. Throughout his life, he tried many, many different jobs. I mean, he was not afraid to be a steam operator. I know that's a long time ago, but he was a fireman. He practiced law for a while. But when he was 40 years old, he was in a Shell service station, and he was in Kentucky at that time. And what he did was he loved to have the people come in, fill up their tanks of gas, but he knew they were travelers and so they might be hungry. So he would offer them some of his food, and we know he could cook now. He'd been practicing a long time. So eventually he kind of saw that that took off, and he thought across the street there was this building that was a restaurant, and so he purchased the building and opened a restaurant. And of course, what do you think was one of the first things on his menu? Was this fried chicken. Now, everybody in the South with me can fried chicken, but he did it a little different. He tried what was called a pressure cooker, which no one had done. Typically, fried chicken took a long time in a pan with a lot of oil, but he had perfected this way of making this chicken, and people were flooding into his restaurant, and he was very well known, so well known that the governor of the state decided to give him an honorary colonelship, if you want to call it that. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but that's what it was. And so he became known as Colonel Sanders. You're probably already ahead of me in this story. So eventually, he became a franchiser of KFC. But what happened with him is that he was doing this restaurant. It was booming. He had perfected the 11 special seasonings that were in there using this pressure cooker method. And an interstate, brand new interstate, many of us know it as I-75, came right through his area. And so traffic weaned, meaning not as many travelers went through the town. So he sold the restaurant. And the thing is that he was now somewhere early in his 60s. He sold the restaurant and decided that what he would do is go from restaurant to restaurant around the country and offer them to cook his chicken. And for every chicken that he would sell, he would make 5 cents.
Hey, that's a good deal.
5 cents was pretty darn good. Well, we know the story. Eventually, he opened many more restaurants. And with that, he continued. Now, what really intrigues me about his story is that throughout his life, he constantly had to look at the future and say, what can I do different? How can I do that differently?
Right.
So when he sold his restaurant and said, the interstate's coming through, what did he do? He thought, I'm going to think of this differently. And he is really known for being the first person to bring the concept of having franchises. And so that's how he did it. And when he finally, Colonel Sanders may have sold KFC, but he stayed engaged in the work, and he was used as their promoter. You've seen his picture on the buckets of chicken and so forth.
But the other really cool thing is that he also did this at 65 years old.
That's right.
He wasn't a spring chicken at that point anymore.
Play on words, spring chicken. That was cute. I love that. It's really, really true. I'm here, and I'm 70, and this is a brand new adventure for me, and it gives me great excitement to be here. So you can always reimagine your future. It's not like you're escaping. Imagination doesn't have to be just about, I'm going to imagine myself in some fairyland, like everything is perfect and going well. It's not about escaping your reality. It really should be to use as a way to create your future. So your imagination can create your future. You know, the Word of God says in Romans 4:17, it says that God says, call into existence the things that do not exist.
Just like we did when
That's
we
right.
said we're going to be podcast hosts.
So those I am statements that you're going to start writing down after you've recognized your negative things, they're the things that your future can look like. So I can say with real confidence today, before I started podcasting, I am a podcaster. So God wants you to know that you can speak into your future. So when something is non-existent doesn't mean you can't make that a reality through your imagination. So the only thing about that is that you really do have to move on your dreams and you have to partner with God. He's the one who's going to give you the ideas. He's going to be the one who shows you the way. That's how Jenna and I understood what God wanted us to do. So you have to become his partner. And the Bible also talks about that. He says, this is what the scripture or the Bible means when it says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind can imagine what God has in store for you or those that love him. Isn't that a fantastic verse? I mean, it takes my imagination just to even understand the verse.
Absolutely.
Because what do you mean? You know, no eye has seen, no ear has heard. That's fantastic. So God has a life assignment for you, and it necessitates activating your imagination.
Sure does.
We used to do it as children all the time. So don't give up. Think really big, God-sized, imaginated dreams, and your future will be secure for you.
It's so true. So the next R that leads right into it is once you have dreamed all of these dreams, then you have to start a fire or reignite your fire that's within you that you've already started. And you know, Fran has a really funny story about me and building a fire, so I'll let her share that.
Well, you could share it too, Jenna. We recently, Jenna invited me to go with her family up to a wonderful place in northern Michigan where they had a beautiful little cabin, and so it was like camping and fishing and walking trails. Well, I grew up camping, and so what does anybody who's out in the forest do? You got to build a fire at some given point. So good fire builders, her son and I, we went looking for some kindling, and she got out some additional tinder and varying other things, and we had the fire ring, and we started the fire. And it was a little fire. It starts little, right? You all know that.
Yeah.
And so, okay, it looked pretty good, so she stacked 3 big logs, teepee style, over this little fire. And so we're all excited. It looked like it was going to catch, and it was actually some of the logs were catching. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one of the logs just falls down. Yeah. And it falls right into the smaller fire. And what do you think happened? It actually extinguished the fire. Now, what did Jenna do? Did she give up?
No. I picked up that log and put it right back where it was and continue to start building the fire again.
That's right.
And the reason we tell you that story is not to make fun of me, but also to just show you that there are going to be times where you start building a fire and the log's going to fall over and it's going to extinguish the fire and you're going to have to start over. There was many times in my life where I thought I was going in a certain direction, building a fire, and then the Lord was like, nope, I don't want you to go that way. And so he threw a log, extinguished it, and now I had to pivot, and I'm going a different way.
That's right.
Like I am today. And, you know, it's said that passion is the fuel that propels us towards any significant measure of achievement, excellence, or fulfillment in our chosen field.
That's right.
Besides, passionate people are the source of real change in this world, because if you aren't passionate, you're not going to continue to do whatever it takes to get to the end result that you're looking
That's
for.
right.
And the unfortunate thing is that there are so many people in this world that have unidentified passions. And they're like glowing embers right now.
They are.
That all it's going to take is just a little breath or just a little kindling to just reignite. And that's what we want to encourage you to do. We want you to think about this little fire that we keep talking about as your life. Reignite that fire of your life.
Yeah.
God put in each one of us a unique role for mankind, and it's called your God-given life assignment. And it took me 40 years. It took her 70 years.
That's right.
To figure out what this was. And we don't want you to have to wait as long as we did. That's why we're here. That's why we're sharing this message with you.
Yeah, that's right. So the question really is then, what is your passion? Have you identified it?
Well, it took us a long time. Have the heavy logs of your life smothered or extinguished your fire?
It's a great question, and I think it's worth you taking a few moments.
Absolutely. Because it's time to reignite your fire. It's time to start carrying out what God had planned for you. And we can tell you from experience that it's so rewarding.
It really is, and that really kind of jumps us right into number 6 of the 7 of our R's, which is relentless courage. I really had to think about that word relentless.
Sure.
The definition of it is someone who is relentless, is so determined to do something and just absolutely refuses to give up, even if what they're doing is mocked or misunderstood. Now, I love that definition because I know in my life there were many times that I had what I would consider a wild dream or a thought.
Yes.
And I would be laughed at, or someone would go, I don't understand what you're trying to say. And so it diminished me in a way, because I was like, well, am I not communicating? Am I just not communicating? But if you continue to do something like that relentless side, it also takes a great deal of courage. So what does it mean when we say relentless courage? I think you're getting the picture already, but I'm going to give you a little story here. Courage really is a mental or moral strength to adventure or persevere and at whatever it is that you're doing, through dangers, through fear or difficulty. So there's fear in our lives. Many things make us afraid. It's a key tool or weapon of the enemy. So I'm going to tell you a story. Now I'm going to confess to you that when I started to talk about this, I had 2 stories in mind. One that many of you are familiar with, which is the David and Goliath story. And then I had the other one, which was Daniel in the lion's den. And I struggled. I was telling Jenna about this. I was like, I don't know which story to tell, because they're both so incredibly good. But what I'm going to do is tell you more about the story of Daniel. I think you all know the story of David and Goliath. He was a youth and he had to fight an enemy, and he courageously said, what's wrong with all you people in the army shivering with fear? I'll go and take that giant.
Right.
Well, we have a different story with Daniel. Daniel was taken captive, so his country had gone through war and he was now a captive. And because he was of the reigning aristocracy there, they put him in a program for young men who were smart and bright. And they were going to teach him the ways of their new culture. And one of the things that he was sort of adamant about is he didn't really want to eat the way that they thought was going to bulk him up and make him everything. He wanted to continue to follow what God had placed in his life. And so he bravely asked whether or not they could do a test and allow him to eat the foods that they were used to, him and 3 of his friends. And so they did, and it turned out that they were healthier and stronger than the people who were eating the heavy meats and all the other things. They were eating vegetables and grains. So that was the beginning of a very long, so he had to be relentless in his courage, because he was under captivity for over 70 years. Now, Daniel received favor from God throughout those 70 years. He reigned under 3 different kings. And during those times, there were many people who said, "Who is this Daniel? He prays 3 out of his window 3 times a day to his God." Then they tried all these schemes. One time they said to the king, "Why don't you build this altar and make everybody in your kingdom bow down? And if they don't, you're going to throw them in the fire." Daniel and his friends, they didn't bow down. They stayed convictus. They knew they were determined to do, and it took a great deal of courage. We also know the story of his 3 friends who were thrown in that fire, but God was with them. Then comes a day when they schemed again, and they said, "Hey, what if we say the only person that anyone can pray to is to you, O king?" Because the king had this stature of pride.
How self-centered, too.
Wasn't it, though?
Oh.
And so the king said, "Oh, that's a great idea." Well, they knew that Daniel prayed to his God 3 times a day. And so, sure enough, even though there was this law that said Daniel did not give up, he stayed courageous. And so, even though the king loved him because of the law that he made, he had to throw Daniel into a den of lions. And the story goes that he spent the whole night there, and the king could not sleep that whole night, worried over Daniel. When he went the next morning, he called out, "Daniel, Daniel," wondering if he was still alive. And Daniel says, "Yes, I'm here." And it was amazing. And he said, "God has closed the mouths of the lions." And so the king had him pulled up. And what happened is the men who had instigated this law were thrown in. And it says that before they even hit the ground in this pit, the lions had attacked them. So when you're courageous, when you stay true to that passion that God has given to you, stay true to the fire that you're building into your life, keep fueling it, what happens is God walks right alongside of you. He's there for you. And you just need to do it. I know that's a statement from Nike,
Yeah.
Just do it. But it's a great saying, really. Just do it. It's going to build your faith, and that faith is going to give you the courage to move forward into your dreams.
It really is. It's also going to get you to finally step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And actually step forward into what the Lord has for you. I mean, how many times have we allowed pride to get in the way of where we were going in our life, and then we maybe had to suffer consequences for it?
Oh,
and
it's kind of like this. "God, I think I can help you.
Right.
Here, let me do it."
Well, and then there are times when we get to the end of it and we're like, "Oh, thank you, Lord, for protecting me from that."
That's right.
How many times have we said that? Well, if we would have gotten out of our own way and got rid of our pride,
that's right,
we wouldn't have had to worry about it. And we just want you to remember that even if you're taking a baby step forward into what God has for you, baby steps are still steps forward.
That's right. Absolutely right. Every little step, it's been said, I don't know, many philosophers have said this, but it really is true. And I think what I love about that is that I heard it my whole life. Just do it. Go do it. But fear kept me. And finally, Jenna and I, we recognized that we were building that foundation. We built the fire, and there came a day, right? We just had to do it.
We did. And that's where resilience comes in.
That's right.
So some of us have a lot of resilience. This is the 7th R in rebuilding your fire. And so as I said, some of us have a lot of resilience, but some of us not so much. And we like to think of it as like your muscles. So you have muscles, you work out to build those muscles up. Well, it's the same thing with resilience. Everything that you go through is building those resilience muscles. Right. And resilience is having the ability to mentally and emotionally withstand and recover from life's adversities. And we really want you to remember that word, recover. I remember when I was younger and I was dating this guy, and it was my longest relationship at the time, and we were gonna get married, and
All the beautiful
all the things we
dreams.
dream about, right? And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he says, I want to break up. And I was devastated. I remember crying in my mother's lap and just saying, why doesn't anyone love me? Why am I not lovable? And then I went through a series of major adjustments because, you know, when you break up with somebody, your friends change.
Yeah.
The
Isn't that true?
the places you go have feelings because you shared those places together. Your routine changes. Your self-care starts to increase because you're not worried about someone else. You're worried about yourself at that point. And it's kind of like a toddler where, you know, toddlers learn to walk and they fall down.
Yeah.
And you have to get back up. And that's part of building the muscle. And I just really look back on it and think about how silly it is now. you know?
You know, when you go through any kind of a relationship break, in this case where you really love someone, whether it's with a family member like a son,
Yeah.
it feels like a death.
It does.
It just does feel like a death, and you're not really sure how to rein in your emotions.
Definitely not.
One of the really big things that I want to focus on just for a second, if you don't mind, is that right there is going to be like you opened the gates for Satan to come and say, see, I told you so. You're not really lovable. You're the worst mother there ever was. You're not a very good co-worker. All of these things, he pours that in. So these muscles that Jenna's talking about are really important for you to build up in.
Well, and they're really important because they help you conquer those. They help you be able to say, no, I take all thoughts captive and make them obedient to Christ. I mean, what if I decided to never date again because I was hurt one time? I mean, I'm married now. I have a beautiful son who's 7 years old.
He's the cutest thing. I just have to tell you, I love him to pieces.
He's adorable.
He is.
But I would have missed out on all that. I would have missed out on all of that God had for me had I not built up those resilience muscles to deal with the hard things of life.
Yeah.
Because life is hard, but it's a lot easier when you have Jesus to help you and to protect you and to carry you. I love that poem, The Footprints in the Sand.
Yeah.
And how those are the times that I carried you. Well, there are days...
Explain a little bit about that, how there's this picture.
Yeah, so it talks about how there's two sets of footprints in the sand, and that represents the man and, you know, God walking along life with him. And then he's looking back, and at times there's only one set of footprints, and the man says to God, where were you? You were nowhere to be found. I was lost. I needed you.
Right.
And Jesus' reply was, those were the times that I carried you.
Doesn't that just bring you a sense of comfort? And I mean, you're never alone in the journey of this life.
You're never alone. And I just remember there have been times in my life where I have said, oh Lord, this is one of those times you're carrying me, huh?
Better be.
Right, because I'm not doing it well on my own.
Yeah. So if you've never actually had that kind of relationship with God, you hear us talk about it. I mean, we're spiritual people, and many of you may not have a relationship with God, and that's okay. These steps are still very important for you to know that whatever it is that God has for you is possible. And we say whatever God has for you because we do believe that God is the creator of us. It says in His Word that He created every human being. He knew you, before you were even born. Now, that's one of those things that's hard to imagine, but it takes a little bit of faith. But here's the thing. He proved it. And the way that He proved that was He said, you know, I sent these two beautiful people into the world, and sin entered because they chose something that wasn't right for them. Well, how many times have I chosen things that aren't right for me? And if I didn't have someone to come up behind me and say, you know what, I'll pay the debt for that, or I'll take over whatever is going on your behalf, I would be crushed. I wouldn't know how to continue to live. But God sent his son Jesus. And Jesus came specifically to tell us how much the Father loves us, show us ways that we can look at things differently, right? So that's what we're doing. We're trying to show you how to live your life differently. And that's what Jesus came to do. He told us so many things that we hadn't thought of before. But more than that, he laid down his life for us at the cross.
He sure did.
And he poured out his blood for us. And all he wants is for you to recognize that. That'd be like if someone handed you a gift. I was telling Jenna this actually today, so this is just kind of a thought that came to me today. What if I got this big, beautiful gift, and it was all wrapped up beautiful, and I said, thank you, and I put it in a closet, and I never looked at it again. Then one day, maybe I opened the closet, 20 years down the road, maybe for me, and there's that gift, and I think, oh, I wonder what's in there. And I open it up, and it is the very thing that I would have needed at that very moment. Well, Jesus is that gift for you today. Maybe you've put him aside. Maybe you've decided that he's not really everything he says that he is. But for you to move forward, to build that passionate fire within you, you're going to need someone to carry you, to cover you, to walk alongside you, to speak truth to you, to give you new ideas and thoughts. And today, if you haven't asked Jesus to come and walk alongside you, it's possible for you to do that.
It sure is.
So we want to invite you, wherever you are today, to just take a moment and say, I need you, Jesus.
And welcome him into your life with open arms.
That's right. It's all it takes. I recognize that you paid an absolute price. You've given me a gift, and I'm going to open it up.
Well, on that note, that is all we have for you today.
Yes.
We would love to connect with you, so please visit our website, sparklightministry.com. Hit the Connect tab. We want to pray for you.
Yes, we do.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear about topics that maybe you want covered. We want to walk alongside you, so we'd love to hear your testimonials as well. You can also connect with us on our website, our Facebook page.
Yes.
And through our YouTube channel. So with that, go out and set the world on fire.